Picture this moment with me. You've just finished another exhausting day at work, the kind that leaves your shoulders tense and your mind foggy. You're traveling for business, somewhere unfamiliar, and all you want is a quiet room where you can disappear for the night. The hotel lobby is nearly empty, just you and a drowsy clerk behind a desk lit by harsh fluorescent lights. He hands you a key card without really looking at you, mutters the room number, and you take the elevator up to what should be just another ordinary night in just another ordinary room. But what if that room doesn't exist? What if the number on your key card leads you somewhere that shouldn't be there? Somewhere that other guests have found before you, and somewhere that refuses to let you leave unchanged. This story comes from the heart of modern Japan, where business hotels line the streets of every major city, offering temporary refuge to countless travelers who pass through like ghosts in the night. But among these anonymous spaces, some rooms carry more than just the weight of countless previous guests. They carry something darker, something that feeds on solitude and preys on those who are already lost in their own lives. What I'm about to share with you happened to a woman named Aya Nakamura, and while you might question whether every detail is exactly as it occurred, the hotel records speak for themselves, the photographs speak for themselves, and the pattern that emerged afterward, well, that speaks loudest of all. So settle in, because tonight we're checking into a room that doesn't officially exist, in a story that will make you think twice about the spaces we inhabit when we're alone and vulnerable. This isn't just about supernatural occurrences or unexplained phenomena. This is about the thin line between isolation and something far more sinister, and what happens when that line disappears entirely. Let me take you to that cold February evening when Aya first received her keycard to room 404. She was 32 years old, worked in data analysis for a mid-sized consulting firm, and lived the kind of quiet life that most people would describe as unremarkable. She spent her days behind computer screens, her evenings alone in her small Tokyo apartment, and her weekends catching up on work she'd brought home. She wasn't unhappy exactly, just disconnected from the world around her in the way that many urban professionals become after years of routine. The seminar in Yokohama was supposed to be routine too. 2 days of presentations about new software systems, networking with colleagues she barely knew, and then back to her regular life. She'd booked a room at the Sakura Business Hotel because it was affordable and close to the conference center, nothing more. The kind of place that catered to traveling salesmen and corporate trainers, with small clean rooms and minimal amenities. Her train from Tokyo was delayed by nearly an hour due to signal problems, which meant she didn't arrive at the hotel until almost 11:30 at night. The lobby was dimly lit, with only every other fluorescent panel turned on to save electricity during the quiet hours. The air conditioning hummed softly, creating that particular hollow sound that large empty spaces make after dark. Behind the front desk sat an elderly man who looked like he'd been fighting sleep for hours. His uniform was wrinkled, his name tag slightly askew, and when Aya approached, he barely lifted his eyes from the small television he'd been watching. She gave him her name and reservation number, and he fumbled through a stack of keycards before selecting one and sliding it across the marble counter. "Room 404, he mumbled, pointing vaguely toward the elevators. "4th floor, turn left." The keycard felt unusually cold in her hand, and she noticed that the number was printed slightly off-center, as if it had been added later rather than at the time of manufacture than during the original manufacturing process. The elevator ride was silent except for the mechanical whir of cables and gears. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, Aya was struck by how much colder it felt than the lobby. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with identical doors and illuminated by fluorescent strips that flickered intermittently. Some of the bulbs had burned out completely, creating pockets of shadow between the rooms. She turned left as instructed and walked slowly down the corridor, checking the room numbers as she went. 401, 402, 403, and then something strange. The next door was marked 405. She stopped and looked back, thinking she'd missed something, but no. The sequence definitely skipped from 403 to 405, as if room 404 simply didn't exist. But her keycard clearly said 404, and as she continued down the hallway, she found exactly what she was looking for. There, between what should have been 403 and 405, was a door marked with the number she'd been given. It looked identical to all the others. Same wood finish, same electronic lock, same small peephole at eye level. Aya stood in front of the door for a long moment, studying the numbers and trying to understand why they seemed so out of place. The fluorescent light directly overhead was flickering more rapidly than the others, creating a strobing effect that made her feel slightly dizzy. She noticed that the air near the door was noticeably colder, as if there were a draft coming from underneath. She slid the keycard into the reader and waited for the familiar beep and green light. The lock clicked open, and she pushed the door inward. The room beyond was exactly what she'd expected from a budget business hotel: a single bed with crisp white linens, a small desk with a chair, a television mounted on the wall, and a compact bathroom visible through an open doorway. Everything was clean and orderly, with the kind of impersonal efficiency that characterized thousands of similar rooms across Japan. But as Aya stepped inside and turned on the overhead light, she noticed something peculiar. The room had no mirrors, not just missing mirrors, but places where mirrors had obviously been removed. In the bathroom, there were mounting brackets on the wall above the sink, but no reflective surface. The closet door had faint, rectangular marks where an adhesive-backed mirror had been peeled away. Even the television screen, which should have provided some reflection, had been covered with a thin film that made it completely matte. She set her overnight bag on the bed and walked around the small space, examining the evidence of removed mirrors more closely. The brackets in the bathroom were still shiny, suggesting they'd been installed recently, but never used. The marks on the closet door looked fresh too, as if someone had gone to considerable trouble to eliminate every reflective surface in the room. It was odd, certainly, but not alarming. Maybe the hotel had issues with guests damaging mirrors, or perhaps there were safety concerns she wasn't aware of. Aya unpacked her few belongings, plugged in her phone charger, and settled into the desk chair to review her notes for the next day's presentations. The room was quiet in the way that hotel rooms always are, with the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of a city settling into sleep. She could hear the occasional footstep in the hallway, the ding of the elevator, the murmur of voices from nearby rooms, normal sounds that should have been comforting but somehow felt muted, as if they were reaching her through a thick wall. Around midnight, she decided to take a shower before bed. The bathroom was small but functional, with a compact shower stall and the empty mounting bracket staring at her from above the sink. As she adjusted the water temperature, she found herself glancing repeatedly at those brackets, wondering what kind of mirror had hung there and why it had been removed. The hot water felt good after the long day of travel. But as she stood under the shower head, she became aware of a sound she hadn't noticed before. A soft clicking noise, rhythmic and deliberate, like someone taking photographs with an old camera. She turned off the water and listened carefully, but the sound had stopped. She dried off quickly and wrapped herself in one of the hotel's thin white towels, but the clicking sound had left her on edge. Hotel rooms always had their quirks, their unexplained noises and settling sounds, but this felt different somehow, more deliberate. Back in the main room, she noticed her phone screen was illuminated on the desk. She was certain she'd left it face down after plugging it in, but now it was displaying her camera app. The photo gallery was open, showing the last picture she'd taken, a boring shot of her train ticket from earlier that day. She closed the app and placed the phone face down again, making a mental note to be more careful about accidentally activating features. The bed was comfortable enough, with crisp sheets that smelled faintly of industrial detergent. As she settled under the covers, Aya found herself staring at the ceiling, counting the small imperfections in the paint to distract herself from the strangeness of the evening. The absent mirrors, the clicking sound, the cold air near the door. All perfectly explainable, she told herself. Just the accumulation of small oddities that made any unfamiliar place feel unsettling. Around 1 a.m, she was finally drifting toward sleep when her phone buzzed with a text message. She reached for it groggily, expecting to see a late-night message from a colleague, or maybe a spam notification. Instead, the screen showed a message from herself, sent to her own number just moments ago. The message contained a single photo attachment. When she opened it, her blood went cold. It was a picture of her lying in this very bed, taken from somewhere near the foot of the mattress. In the photograph, she appeared to be sleeping peacefully, but there was something wrong with her expression. Her lips were curved upward in a slight smile, the kind of unconscious expression that might appear natural in most circumstances, but looked deeply unsettling in the context of someone supposedly asleep and alone. Aya sat up quickly, her heart racing as she looked around the empty room. The door was still locked, the chain still engaged. The bathroom was empty. The small closet contained nothing but spare pillows and blankets. There was nowhere for someone to hide, no way for anyone else to have taken that photograph. She examined her phone more carefully, checking the metadata of the image. It had been taken at 1:03 a.m. just minutes ago, using her own device. But that was impossible. She'd been holding the phone when the message arrived, and before that, it had been sitting on the desk across the room. Sleep became impossible after that. She spent the rest of the night sitting in the desk chair, her back against the wall where she could see the entire room, her phone clutched in her hand. Every small sound made her jump. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder now, punctuated by occasional clicks and pops from the building's infrastructure. Or at least, she hoped that's what they were. When morning finally arrived, pale gray light filtering through the heavy curtains, Aya felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment. In the daylight, the events of the night seemed less threatening, more like the product of travel fatigue and an overactive imagination. She'd heard of people sleep texting, unconsciously operating their phones while in a drowsy state. Maybe she'd somehow taken the photograph herself without fully waking up. She gathered her belongings quickly, eager to get to the conference and put the strange night behind her. But as she was packing her phone charger, she noticed something that made her pause. There, on the desk where her phone had been sitting, was a faint rectangular outline in the dust. It was perfectly clean, as if something had been resting there for a long time and had recently been moved. The outline was exactly the size of a small picture frame. At the conference that day, Aya found it difficult to concentrate on the presentations. Her mind kept returning to the events in room 404, turning them over like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. During the lunch break, she called the hotel from the lobby of the conference center. The The same elderly man answered, his voice sounding even more tired in the daylight. When she asked about room 404, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "We don't have a room 404, he said finally. "Our fourth floor goes from 403 to 405. Many hotels skip the number 4 because it's considered unlucky. But I stayed there last night," Aya insisted. "You gave me the key card yourself." Another pause, longer this time. She could hear papers rustling in the background as if he was checking something. "Miss, I don't see any record of you checking into that room. According to our system, you were assigned to room 312. That's where your luggage should be." The conversation ended with confusion on both sides, the clerk insisting that their records were accurate while Aya insisted on what she'd experienced. When she hung up, she immediately checked her phone for the photograph from the night before. The message thread was still there, but the image file wouldn't load. It showed only a gray box with an error message indicating that the file was corrupted or missing. That afternoon, she found herself unable to focus on the networking sessions and technical demonstrations that were supposed to be the purpose of her trip. Instead, she kept thinking about the missing mirrors, the cold air near the door, and that photograph of herself smiling in her sleep. By the time the conference ended at 5 o'clock, she'd made a decision that she knew was probably foolish, but felt necessary nonetheless. She was going back to room 404. The train ride back to Yokohama felt longer than it had the day before, every stop stretching out as if the city itself was reluctant to let her return to the hotel. By the time she arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky the same gray color she remembered from that morning. The hotel lobby looked different in the evening light, more cramped somehow, with shadows gathering in the corners despite the fluorescent illumination. A different clerk was working the front desk now, a young woman with tired eyes who looked up expectantly as Aya approached. When she asked about room 404, the woman's expression grew puzzled, then concerned. "I'm sorry, but we don't have a room with that number. Our fourth floor has rooms 401 through 403, then 405 through 412. It's a common superstition in Japanese buildings to skip the number 4. Aya pulled out her phone, intending to show the woman the keycard she'd photographed the night before, but when she scrolled through her camera roll, the image wasn't there. In fact, none of the photos she remembered taking during her trip were in her phone's memory. The gallery showed only older images from weeks ago, as if the last 2 days had been completely erased from her digital life. The elevator ride to the fourth floor felt different this time, the mechanical sounds seeming louder and more ominous. When the doors opened, she was struck again by the temperature difference, but now she noticed something else. The fluorescent lights were dimmer than she remembered, and several more bulbs had burned out, creating longer stretches of shadow between the illuminated sections. She walked slowly down the hallway, counting the room numbers as she went. 401, 402, 403, and then 405, just as the hotel staff had said. There was no room 404. No door between the others where she remembered spending the night. Just a blank stretch of wall with the same generic hotel wallpaper, unmarked and unremarkable. But as she stood there studying the empty space, she noticed something that made her skin crawl. The wallpaper wasn't quite right. There was a faint rectangular outline, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, exactly where a door should have been. And along the bottom edge of that outline there was a thin gap, just wide enough for a keycard to slide through. Aya stared at that faint, rectangular outline on the wall, her breath forming small clouds in the unusually cold air. The gap at the bottom was unmistakable now that she'd noticed it, a thin line of deeper shadow that seemed to call to her like a mouth barely open. Without fully understanding why she was doing it, she reached into her purse and pulled out the key card from the night before. The plastic slid easily into that impossible gap, and she heard the familiar electronic beep from somewhere beyond the wall. The outline began to glow faintly around the edges, and then the entire rectangular section swung inward like a hidden door, revealing the room she'd spent the night in. Room 404 was exactly as she remembered it, down to the rumpled bedsheets and the faint smell of industrial detergent, mixed with something else she couldn't identify, something metallic and cold, like old coins left in a freezer. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo from every surface at once. This time, she was prepared. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera app, determined to document everything she experienced. If this room existed, if these events were really happening, then she would have proof. She positioned herself at the foot of the bed and took several photos of the space, making sure to capture the mounting brackets in the bathroom and the marks on the closet door where mirrors had been removed. But when she looked at the images on her phone's screen, they showed something impossible. The photos displayed a completely different room, one with mirrors covering every available surface. The bathroom mirror showed her reflection clearly, as did a full-length mirror on the closet door and even smaller mirrors mounted on the walls between the windows. In these photographs, her reflection was smiling in every single surface, the same unsettling expression from the previous night. Yet when she looked up from her phone, the room remained exactly as it was, with no mirrors anywhere to be seen. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed, trying to process what was happening to her. The mattress felt different now, firmer somehow, as if it had been replaced with something that only resembled furniture. When she pressed down with her hand, it barely gave it all, more like pressing against concrete covered with a thin layer of fabric. The digital clock on the bedside table read 8:47 p.m., though she was certain it had been closer to 7 when she'd arrived at the hotel. Time seemed to move differently here, flowing at its own pace regardless of what the outside world might be doing. She wondered if anyone had noticed her absence from the conference dinner, if her colleagues were trying to reach her. When she checked her phone for missed calls or messages, she found something that made her stomach drop. Her entire contact list was empty. Every number, every name, every connection to the outside world had simply vanished. The phone still worked, still showed full signal strength, but it was as if she'd never known another person in her entire life. The clicking sound started again around 9:30, that familiar rhythm of an old camera shutter firing repeatedly. This time she was ready for it, holding her phone up to record video of the empty room. Through her screen, she could see the source of the sound. A woman was standing in the corner near the bathroom door, holding what appeared to be a vintage camera with a large flash attachment. The woman looked exactly like Aya herself, but wrong in ways that were difficult to articulate. Her smile was too wide, stretching beyond what should have been anatomically possible. Her eyes were too bright, reflecting light that didn't seem to be coming from any source in the room, and she was wearing the same clothes Aya had worn the night before, down to the small coffee stain on her blouse that she'd gotten during the morning commute. The other woman raised the camera and took another photograph, the flash illuminating the room in harsh white light that revealed details Aya hadn't noticed before. The walls were covered in hundreds of photographs, all showing the same scene. Different women, different clothes, different time periods, judging by the fashion and hairstyles, but all sharing that identical, unnatural smile, all taken in this exact room, from this exact angle. As the flash faded, Aya realized she could no longer move her facial muscles. Her lips were frozen in that same wide grin, stretching until her cheeks ached with the effort of maintaining an expression that no longer belonged to her. The other woman lowered her camera and walked toward the door, her movements perfectly synchronized with Aya's own desire to leave. But Aya remained standing in the corner, watching herself walk away, or perhaps watching someone else wearing her face, her clothes, her life. The door closed with that familiar electronic click, and she was alone with the photographs and the silence and the growing understanding that she would never leave this room. The next morning, hotel staff would find her belongings neatly packed, her keycard on the desk beside a fresh photograph. They would add it to the collection in the manager's drawer. Another guest who had found room 404 when they were meant to find somewhere else entirely. And somewhere in the city below, a woman with Aya's face would return to work, attend meetings, live a life that no longer belonged to anyone at all. The curse of room 404 isn't about the supernatural or the unexplained. It's about the spaces between who we are and who we pretend to be, and what happens when those spaces become too wide to bridge. The next time you check into a hotel room alone, count the floors carefully. Check your reflection in every mirror. And remember that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again.